LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the April 17th edition of Liberal Viewer Monday Media Mix-Up. Thanks for joining me. I'll be using the 11 best, most newsworthy clips I picked out from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States, for which would be a really informative, educational, fair use media criticism and political commentary show for you all today. My topic today is a follow-up of last week's topic, where I was talking about this one radical Trump judge from Amarillo, Texas, who might ban most of the abortions in the United States, since most of the abortions in the United States are done not surgically, but just by taking pills. Mifepristone is the pill in question that this judge last week ordered to be banned throughout the entire country. And then the Fifth Circuit stepped in since last week's show, and they stayed some of that order. They stopped some of it from happening, but then the stuff that went back like 20 years, but the stuff that just went back 6 years, like where they made women only have to go see the doctor once instead of three times, and they let people do it up to 10 weeks, use the pill up to 10 weeks instead of just 7 weeks, and they let the pill be sent through the mail. All those changes in the last 6 years, the Fifth Circuit said those are going to stop, and that also would have made it a lot less convenient for a lot of women in the United States. And then finally, at the end of the week, the Supreme Court stepped in. Justice Samuel Alito, who's in charge of the Fifth Circuit, he stayed the whole thing until Wednesday, and then the Supreme Court's going to make a decision either to continue stopping those lower orders from going into effect, or who knows what they're going to do. But it's possible this week that we'll see the Supreme Court uphold this ban on most U.S. abortions. That's why my main title is Supreme Court Bans Most U.S. Abortions This Week. And I'll be talking mostly about that, but then there are a couple other topics. There's the topic of guns. There have been multiple additional mass shootings. There's like a mass shooting every day, and you'll see a couple of the news summaries are going to include this mass shooting at a Sweet 16 birthday party in Alabama or something. It's like, I don't know what you're supposed to do, like harden our birthday parties. So, armed guards and locked doors at all birthday parties. Come on. I mean, I think the guns are the problem, and they'll talk about guns in some of these news summaries, especially with most of the potential Republican presidential candidates, including Trump and DeSantis and Mike Pence, all went and spoke at an NRA convention. I believe it was in Indiana this last weekend. And then there's also this big leak story. This 21-year-old Massachusetts Air National Guard member, Jack, is it Teixeira? Teixeira? I'm not sure how you pronounce his last name, but he leaked these classified documents in a Discord wargaming group or whatever, and that'll be in the news summary. So I'll also be covering those topics, but mainly the topic of abortion at the Supreme Court, using my background as a lawyer, and I do also have some extra medical knowledge I picked up over the years, and I will be combining those to talk about that main topic. And my political comedy is like the one joke they made about the abortion issue uh, on Saturday Night Live's Weekend Update. Michael Che makes the joke, and he does something I've complained about before, but I don't know if it ruins the joke to complain about it before the clip, so I'll just make the complaint after we watch that first brief clip together over here.
After a judge's ruling left access to abortion pills uncertain, some state officials are stockpiling them just in case. Officials like California Governor Gavin Newsom, Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey, and New York comedian Michael Che. After
And one thing I've mentioned multiple times before for Saturday Night Live Weekend Update clips is that a lot of the topical humor that especially Michael Che's jokes, this happens somewhat with Colin Jost too, but instead of like the joke being about the topic, it's about Michael Che. It's really a joke about Michael Che and his whatever supposed lifestyle that I don't even know what that's based on, but I don't know. I guess he's living the single life or whatever. Is that what that's supposed to mean? But anyway, that wasn't a joke about the important national topic of abortion. That was a joke about Michael Che. But anyway, I'm now going to show you the news summaries in order from longest to shortest. This week, Chuck Todd had the longest news summary. I can't say package because it used to be that he would do a little intro and then there'd be a pre-recorded video package. So I would say Chuck Todd had the longest package or the biggest package this week, but no. He does show some video clips, but he just keeps narrating all the way through. I don't think he stopped doing that, so I would stop talking about his package. I'm sure there was some other like big corporate reason, with all sorts of focus group research where they decided to change the intro to Meet the Press. I don't know why they did it, but this is, like I said, most the topics, I think all the topics, well, it's mostly guns and abortion. I don't think, well, we'll have to watch it together. I don't recall whether the classified document leaks were in the Meet the Press news summary at the beginning. I know they talked about it later, but anyway, I guess we'll all find out together as we watch that news summary together over here.
Good Sunday morning. Debates over guns and abortion have roiled this nation for decades. This week, those debates feel a bit more intense than they have in a while, and there are some deepening tensions between activists who wield power inside Republican primary circles and the overall electorate. Today marks the 16th anniversary of the Virginia Tech shooting. At the time, it was the deadliest mass shooting in U.S. history. 32 people were killed. Now, sadly, it's been surpassed by mass shootings in Las Vegas and Orlando. After 5 people were killed this week in a mass shooting in Louisville, Kentucky, 6 more killed 2 weeks ago at a school in Nashville. 2024 Republican hopefuls gathered at the NRA convention on Friday and rejected the idea that gun restrictions could somehow limit gun violence, and the NRA continued to demand unlimited political allegiance from the GOP.
I will stand.
Gun-hating politicians should never go to bed unafraid of what this association and all of our millions of members can do to their political careers.
The issue is not too many guns. The issue is too many thugs, hoodlums, and savage criminals on our street.
Little Miss Addie, who is almost 2, I want to reassure you, she already has a shotgun and she already has a rifle. And she's got a little pony named Sparkles, too, so the girl is set up.
A Gallup poll conducted before the Louisville and Nashville shootings showed 63% of Americans are dissatisfied with the nation's gun laws. But a majority of Republicans, 54%, are satisfied. And so far, that overall dissatisfaction number hasn't translated to the ballot box. Not a single pro-gun elected politician has been thrown out over the issue. But that's not true on abortion. Nowhere is the gap between the Republican base and the overall general electorate greater than on this issue, particularly after the overturning of Roe v. Wade. On Friday, the Supreme Court put a temporary hold on a lower court ruling on the abortion pill, while the court considers the Biden administration's request to preserve FDA approval of the drug. The stay keeps the abortion pill widely available for now, with perhaps another decision expected by Wednesday to try to clear some of this up. Of course, in theory, with the Dobbs decision, the court thought it was sending abortion back to the states. Clearly, that is not the case. The Dobbs decision is not popular with the public. While 61% of voters disapproved of the court's decision to overturn Roe in a fall NBC News poll, 69% of Republicans approved of it. Republican elected leaders are well aware of the political challenges abortion presents right now. In 2024, presidential hopefuls have struggled to answer simple questions about where they stand on abortion rights and access. This week, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis quickly signed a 6-week abortion ban before a speech at Evangelical Liberty University. But he did it behind closed doors, and then he never mentioned what he did in his speech. Donald Trump has repeatedly refused to say whether he would even support a federal law that would restrict abortion. And you'll hear Tim Scott, Nikki Haley, even Mike Pence, all of them are struggling to define their views on this issue.
Is it encouraging a culture of life, though, to propose the death penalty for women who get abortions?
I must tell you that I'm not familiar with those proposals, and I don't have a way of responding to that or confirming it.
I would literally sign the most conservative pro-life legislation that they can get through Congress.
Even if it was 6 weeks?
I'm not going to talk about 6 or 5 or 7 or 10.
I don't want unelected justices deciding something this personal. We're not going to let this be a political football. Let's let the states work this out. If Congress decides to do it, but don't get into that game of them saying how many weeks. No, let's first figure out what we agree on.
And joining me now is Democratic Senator Tammy Baldwin of Wisconsin, who announced this week that she...
And I actually don't have a clip of the Democratic Senator Tammy Baldwin. I want to show some bad cross-examination on Chuck Todd's part of the Republican Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana. If you look down in the video description, I have brief summaries of all 11 of the clips. Right, 11 clips, yeah. And so you can, I think that's clip 8. I just showed you clip 2. The NBC News Meet the Press news summary. Why is it that nobody reports on the fact that this is like most U.S. abortions? I keep putting it in my title because that's like, we're talking about most U.S. abortions. Now, of course, they could do it just with the second drug. You know, it's mifepristone and misoprostol, the miso, they call it, miso, where they give the mifepristone to stop the progesterone that has the embryo continuing developing, and then they give the misoprostol a couple days later for the contractions that expel the no longer living embryo or whatever. So they could, if the Supreme Court bans mifepristone around the country or whatever, they can still do these what's called a medication abortion or medical abortion with just the misoprostol pill, but it's several percentage points less effective, and it often leads to more complications. So it's like bad for women. But anyway, I don't know why none of the news summaries like give any of those details or point out that that most U.S. abortions are performed using this pill. That I think there are a couple of the news summaries say that like many U.S. abortions, but nobody says most. I don't think any of them say most, but I did like the way NBC News Meet the Press kind of laid out the waffling of all the Republicans, and I would contrast that with what happens on Fox News Sunday in clip 10, where Republican Representative Nancy Mace talks to Shannon Bream, and they don't really talk about that waffling. They talk about like how to get away with the waffling, really, but I'm getting ahead of myself, and I should probably get to the next news summary. It's the next longest news summary is CBS News' Face the Nation, which was gone last week for golf, but they're back this week, and Mark Strassmann is back in Atlanta, or I think he's based in Atlanta. Margaret Brennan does a brief intro that includes the shooting in Alabama, and then Mark Strassmann does a report on guns and abortion, the same thing. Oh, and before I get to that, though, one other thing to keep in mind, you saw that NBC News poll on abortion here. I took a screenshot of it. Also keep that in mind when we get to the Shannon Bream discussion with Republican Representative Nancy Mace on Fox News Sunday, where they kind of skew the polls. But anyway, here's CBS News, Face the Nation, Margaret Brennan, Mark Strassmann talking about the breaking news of the shooting yesterday. But is that breaking news when there's like a mass shooting every day? And then Mark Strassmann talking about guns and abortion over here.
Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. We are monitoring a developing story in Dadeville, Alabama. Overnight there was a shooting at a 16th birthday party at a local dance hall. Information at this point is very limited, but the Alabama Law Enforcement Agency reports there have been 4 fatalities and multiple injuries. Another big story we are covering today is abortion rights and the increasingly tighter restrictions across the country following the Supreme Court decision to overturn Roe versus Wade nearly a year ago. We begin with our Mark Strassmann in Atlanta.
Dadeville, Alabama. Population roughly 3,000. The scene of a weekend Sweet 16 party that turned to horror. Also overnight, 2 people were killed when someone fired shots into a crowd in Louisville, Kentucky, still reeling from last week's bank massacre.
This has been an unspeakable week of tragedy for our city.
New Mexico authorities just released this police body cam footage. Officers responding to a domestic violence call. It's the wrong house. But the confused homeowner's apparently armed, and police fatally shoot him. It's another American front line, what to do about gun violence. Our new CBS News poll shows roughly 3 in 4 Americans believe mass shootings are preventable. Increasingly worried, parents, 77% at least somewhat concerned, up from an already high 72% last year. About 60% of parents say their kids worry about gun violence. What about fewer guns or no guns? 83% of Democrats say America would be safer, but only 25% of Republicans. Easy access to guns contrasts with abortion access in America.
Our bodies! Our bodies!
More precarious than ever. By Wednesday midnight, another potential Supreme Court milestone, deciding the future availability of mifepristone, the most commonly taken abortion drug. More broadly, our CBS News poll shows American women, by a roughly 4-to-1 margin, believe access to reproductive health care is getting harder, especially in red states. More than half of voters in those states see more restrictions coming. Take Florida. Last Thursday, Governor Ron DeSantis signed into law a bill banning abortions after 6 weeks of pregnancy.
With Florida's new law, abortion access here in the South essentially is limited to 2 states, North and South Carolina.
Republican leaders generally approve states deciding the abortion issue. But our poll shows more than half of Americans believe the Republican Party is trying to ban abortion nationally rather than let states decide. That view's driven by abortion rights supporters, both Democrats and independents.
Mark Strassmann in Atlanta. We turn now to former Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson, who is attending.
And I also don't have a clip of former Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson. I think I had a clip of him last week on this issue because I want to show the clip of Margaret Brennan talking to Michelle Lujan Grisham, the governor of New Mexico, who tries to articulate the Democratic position, and I don't think does such a great job of it, and Margaret Brennan doesn't follow up enough. They kind of confuses viability with when abortions might be necessary in the late term, which is very rare, and I'll talk about that when I get, that's clip 11 when I get to that clip. But I thought Mark Strassmann did a pretty good job. It was kind of similar to, it was very poll-based, kind of like the NBC News Meet the Press clip, and talked more about the political impact than the actual facts of what happens to women when they can't get access to the safest form of abortion, which is the miso combination that I was talking about earlier. And did not say that they say Mark Strassmann came so close to saying it was most abortions, called it like the most common form of abortion, but not that it's over 50%, like more than half of U.S. abortions are done through these pills. So it didn't quite make it there, but very close. Most common. Oh, if you could just get rid of the word common, it would have been better, but that's my opinion. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section. And now I'm going to get to the Fox News Sunday news summary, which is kind of different as usual from the other ones. It's very focused on this 21-year-old Massachusetts Air National Guards member, what's his name, Jack Teixeira, who allegedly leaked these classified documents. But also talks about guns and abortion like the last two, but with a decidedly different emphasis, as you might imagine, because as I always point out, Fox News isn't really a news organization. It was created to be the propaganda outlet of the Republican Party by Roger Ailes, as you can read in this book over here, The Loudest Voice in the Room by Gabriel Sherman. He actually gives all the historical facts about how that's how Fox News was created. Or go to my YouTube channel, the YouTube channel page, youtube.com/LiberalViewer. And one of the if you scroll down the page, you'll find my Fox News bias playlist where I documented hundreds of examples of Fox News bias that also prove the partisan nature of Fox News. Or there's this lawsuit that was supposed to start today and got postponed till tomorrow. Maybe they're going to settle, or maybe we'll get to see the actual trial where Fox News is pretty much lied because they were lied about Dominion voting systems throwing the election from Trump to Biden because they didn't want to lose viewers to the more right-wing outlets like Newsmax and One America News. And so they like told their viewers the lies they wanted to hear, and more evidence that Fox News is not a news organization. Sometimes, as I pointed out, journalism does like incidentally occur on the Fox News channel, and I don't know if you'll see any, but they do report on this classified documents leak. Lucas Tomlinson, he does give some facts, but the whole spin is so different from the rest of the corporate news media that I show you. It's definitely the odd person out, and I'll talk about it a little more after we watch it together over here.
Hello from Fox News in Washington. We begin this morning with breaking news of a mass shooting in Dadeville, Alabama. A local news affiliate reports at least 20 people have been injured at a teenager's birthday party. We do not yet know the number of people who may have died, but Fox confirms hospitals have been treating gunshot victims. Officials are saying very little, but they have told Fox the situation is, quote, horrible. We'll bring you the latest as it develops. Also this morning, we are learning more details about the Massachusetts Air National Guardsman accused of leaking highly classified documents online. Investigators believe 21-year-old Jack Teixeira may have used his access to find out what the military knew about his alleged leaks. He's now facing federal charges. In a moment, we'll bring in Republican Nancy Mace of South Carolina about whether Congress should hold hearings about that leak. And we'll ask retired General Jack Keane what it all means for the future of security clearances. But first, let's turn to Lucas Tomlinson for a look at the charges against the accused. Hello, Lucas.
Shannon, it's the largest leak of highly classified information from the U.S. military in more than a decade. The accused due back in court this week, the president promising a full investigation.
I've instructed the department to make sure that they get to the root of why he had access in the first place.
21-year-old Airman First Class Jack Teixeira of the Massachusetts Air National Guard made his first court appearance in Boston Friday, one day after the FBI arrested him. He's charged with 2 counts under the Espionage Act. The complaint says beginning in December, Teixeira began posting classified information, including some photos of documents, to an online group called Thug Shakers Central on the gaming app Discord. Some images had top-secret markings. One member of the group says he was like a father figure.
It felt like I was on top of Mount Everest. It felt like I was above everyone else to some degree, and that I knew stuff that they didn't.
Now the Pentagon is looking at how many others had access to the military's Joint Worldwide Intelligence Communications System, better known by its acronym JWICS. Over 1 million Americans have a top-secret clearance. Critics say the Pentagon allows too many eyes on the nation's most sensitive information. The arrest seized America's attention in the middle of a busy news week. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, a likely GOP presidential candidate, signing into law a new 6-week abortion ban late Thursday night with little fanfare. Some concerned how the new law will resonate with moderate voters. Elsewhere, both potential and declared 2024 candidates speaking at the NRA's annual meetings in Indianapolis.
As governor, I've resisted calls to take up gun control.
We don't need lectures about the liberties of law-abiding citizens. We need solutions to protect our kids. I promise you this, with me at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, no one will lay a finger on your firearms.
These are expected to be major issues in 2024. Shannon?
Lucas Tomlinson reporting live at the White House. Lucas, thank you. Joining us now, South Carolina Congresswoman Nancy Mace. Congresswoman.
And like I said, I will have an extended clip of that interview between Shannon Bream and Nancy Mace on the abortion issue, where I think that they do a lot to, like, instead of talking about the facts, they talk about, like, how can Republicans still win while having their anti-abortion position? And I don't even think they talk about the facts. But anyway, that's like clip 10, and now I just showed you clip 4. But I mean, Lucas Tomlinson did do some journalism. That's what I said. Sometimes journalism does incidentally occur on the Fox News channel. For example, they talked about how Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed that bill at like 11 o'clock at night and to little fanfare or whatever, which you saw in a previous news summary, but that's kind of surprising for Fox News because they have generally been trying to promote Ron DeSantis over Donald Trump as a regular watcher of the channel. Although, I don't know, they may be like starting to lean more towards Trump because it looks like Trump is probably going to be the Republican presidential candidate in 2024. Maybe they've made an editorial decision to switch from DeSantis to Trump. I don't know. But anyway, there's also a whole bunch of other spin, especially about the NRA in there. And I'll get to the additional spin when I get to Shannon Bream's interview with Nancy Mace. But I want to finish up the news summaries. I'm only 3/5 of the way through. The next one is ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, where Jon Karl is the host this week, and they talk about the abortion issue back before the Supreme Court. They talk about this Air National Guards member, and I think it's Jack Teixeira, if Shannon Bream was saying it right. So you'll see abortion and the confidential documents leak in this next news summary from ABC that I will talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
Good morning and welcome to This Week. When the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade last year, the court said that the legal status of abortion should not be determined by unelected judges. As Justice Samuel Alito wrote in the majority's opinion, quote, "It is time to heed the Constitution and return the issue of abortion to the people's elected representatives." Nearly a year later, the court is once again at the center of the national debate over abortion, in a position to determine the fate of the most common form of abortion in the United States, the abortion pill, mifepristone. The pill has been legally available for some 23 years, but a decision by a federal judge in Texas aimed to change that, not just in Texas, but throughout the United States. Justice Alito issued an 11th-hour stay late Friday that will leave the availability of the pill unchanged, but only until Wednesday, as the court decides whether to intervene on lower court rulings that would either curtail access to the drug or make it illegal to manufacture and distribute it. We'll cover all the angles of the fast-moving development in just a few minutes, but we begin with the fallout of the arrest of 21-year-old National Guardsman Jack Teixeira for allegedly leaking a treasure trove of classified material. Teixeira has been charged with violating the Espionage Act for allegedly sharing hundreds of classified documents on Discord. That's an online server popular with young gamers. The disclosures included secret U.S. military assessments and revealed just how closely the U.S. monitors our rivals and our allies. The leaks also raised major questions. How did classified documents circulate online for months without the Pentagon's knowledge? Why did a young IT specialist have access to so many closely guarded secrets? And is the leak now contained? Let's dig into all of this with Republican Senator Lindsey Graham.
And yeah, I will have a clip of the Jon Karl, Lindsey Graham interview where I don't think Jon Karl did a great job of cross-examining Lindsey Graham. Not much better than Shannon Bream did last week that I criticized. But I want to finish up the news summaries with the last one here. CNN State of the Union, Jake Tapper also talks about the confidential documents leak and talks about the abortion issue being before the Supreme Court. In the shortest of the news summaries, I will talk about with you a little more after we watch together over here.
Hello, I'm Jake Tapper in Washington, where the state of our union is compromised. President Biden is back in the U.S. after a deeply personal diplomatic visit to Ireland, but he returns to face a thorny new set of issues at home. The U.S. and key allies trying to assess the full damage after the arrest of a 21-year-old member of the Massachusetts Air National Guard accused of posting on Discord highly classified documents. Only the latest trove of U.S. intelligence to be leaked to the public. Those documents include detailed intelligence assessments of both allies and adversaries, including the state of the war in Ukraine. And in Washington, D.C., the U.S. Supreme Court is considering the most important abortion-related dispute since they overturned Roe v. Wade last June. At issue, a medication abortion pill that has been approved by the FDA for decades. Justice Samuel Alito temporarily extended access to mifepristone until Wednesday while the justices weigh a lower court ruling that revoked the drug's FDA approval. That ruling would sharply limit nationwide women and girls' access to the most common method of abortion, a medication also used for miscarriages and menopause, and would come just as the state of Florida moved this week to ban abortions after 6 weeks. Joining us now to discuss, New York Democratic Senator Kirsten Gillibrand.
Yeah, and I'll have the clip there of Jake Tapper, and there they did they say most common? Most common, was that what he didn't say most, but he got very close to saying most, like the other news summary. But that wasn't a bad news summary, and I think Jake Tapper actually has the best cross-examination or the best questioning of any of these newsmakers here. That's why I put his questioning of Kirsten Gillibrand first here, where he talks to her both about the most important question with the mifepristone issue being before the U.S. Supreme Court. Are there 5 votes to override what happened from that one radical Trump judge in Amarillo, Texas, or even to override what the Fifth Circuit did? You know, are there 5 votes on the Supreme Court? And I'll talk about those 5 votes after we watch. Oh, and then Jake Tapper brings up a couple different ways that Democrats could fight this ruling, either by the executive branch ignoring it or the legislative branch trying to change it. And I'll talk about all of that after we watch that. I mean, anyway, there's something going on in the live comments I might address later in the show about the Second Amendment. And I actually know all 27 words of the Second Amendment. I spent years arguing about it on this ACLU message board, and I know the first 13 words and the second 14 words and the first 13 words, how they affect the meaning of the second 14 words, and I can recite all 27 words from memory only because I argued about it for years. And that's why when I corrected one of my live commenters when they used the word vital instead of the word necessary, but maybe if you stay tuned to the end of the live stream on camera without looking at anything, I will recite the 27 words if that makes everybody happy. But that has nothing to do with what I'm talking about here. I just saw that in live comments during that last clip, so maybe I'll talk about that later. But here's Jake Tapper, both trying to find out if there are 5 votes on the Supreme Court to keep mifepristone available, and then ways that Democrats can fight the ruling if it doesn't go their way. And I'll talk about that a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
Do you think there are 5 votes on the U.S. Supreme Court to keep mifepristone legal and have access to it?
We don't know, but what we do know is since the Dobbs decision, this court has had an all-out assault on women's reproductive freedom, starting with that decision that takes away the right to privacy. And what we are seeing in these Republican legislatures, as well as these very conservative courts, is a continuation of that assault. So to take away the right to have medicine is an extension of taking away this right to privacy. To say we can't have medicine sent by doctors by mail to people across the country is further invading into this right to privacy, where the court and government has a right to what's in your mail and who you're talking to and what communications you're having. It's an outrage. And so we will fight in every respect we can. We will file lawsuits. We will continue to appeal this kind of decision. We will also continue to fight state by state to codify Roe in state law. And we've had many ballot initiatives, even in red places like Kansas and Montana, where we have been successful. The American people believe that we have this right to privacy, and people believe that women have reproductive freedom. And so if they want to guarantee it, they're going to have to fight for it, and we're going to eventually have to codify it.
So you said that you're going to have to fight for it, and after the ruling you tweeted, we will not allow this attack on our reproductive freedom to stand. Beyond fighting it in court, what else should Democrats do? I mean, there are some Democrats, as you know, I believe, including Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez from your home state of New York, who say the FDA should just simply ignore the ruling.
It's hard to ignore the rule of law, and we have a court system and an appeal system for a reason. So I think the Biden administration is correct in actually fighting this in the Supreme Court. Whether we win or not in the Supreme Court doesn't mean that's our last effort. We will go state by state to guarantee reproductive freedom. But I think the national conversation we have to have is this right to privacy. When you take away 50% of America's right to privacy to say women don't have it during their reproductive years, it is such an overstretch and an outrageous statement that I think when people wake up to the reality of what this means for a conservative court where they believe they should impose their views of the world on their religious beliefs, their views on health care, on the FDA's decision of 20 years ago of a drug that has been deemed very safe, you have more likely of being risk your health from taking Tylenol than mifepristone. That is a fact. And so where we are today is an outrage and such an overreach by courts that we as people need to fight back. We also need to flip the House, and we need to codify Roe.
So flipping the House, that can't happen until November 2024. But I have to say, there are tools in the House. There's a thing called a discharge petition. You're a former member of the House. You know this, where 218 members of the House can force a bill onto the floor for a vote. And it's hard not to see that there would be 218, mostly Democrats, but also Republicans, that would want to have mifepristone legal by law. How come Democrats aren't doing that? I mean, I know you're not in the House, but shouldn't they be?
They may, and this may be a tactic that they will pursue. But access to medicine is life-saving. And as you said in your opening, this medicine is used for many, many indications, for women in menopause, for miscarriages. Courts and judges should not be imposing their religious beliefs on the FDA and our scientific review of what medicines are healthy for patients.
Let's turn to the shocking leak of classified.
Oh, and then they talk about the classified information leak in the next segment. If you, by the way, down in the video description under sources, there are links to the sources of all the video I'm showing you, so you can watch them in full based on whatever requirements each of the networks put on you before they let you watch. I think you can watch it for free like a week from now, or if you have like a cable provider or you created an account, you can like watch it now for free. That's basically how most of them work, but except for CBS News Face the Nation, it's like all free pretty much on their YouTube channel at the link down in the video description, but not the Mark Strassmann news summary. I don't know why that wasn't uploaded to YouTube, but anyway, I'm going off on a weird video availability tangent, and I want to give kudos to Kirsten Gillibrand there for re-emphasizing the part of the CNN State of the Union news summary that I forgot to emphasize, which is that mifepristone is not just used for abortions, it's also used for miscarriages. She said menopause, but it's women who are experiencing miscarriages and don't, expel the remains or whatever. They need medical intervention, and if mifepristone is banned, that's going to hurt those women. I mean, there are all sorts of terrible effects on women from all the bans on abortion that are going on in many states, and it's just going to get worse and worse politically for Republicans as these horror stories keep mounting up through 2024, because the vast majority of Americans think that women should have adequate health care, which includes health care for their pregnancies, for their miscarriages, for their menopause, for all those things. And anyway, my small quibble with Jake Tapper in that last clip is both the things he was saying. I mean, he was asking, I guess, whether they were a good way to fight the Republican court and their rulings, the ignoring the ruling, the executive branch ignoring the ruling, I don't think is a good idea. And then the whole thing about the discharge petition, where like 218 members of the House could actually get a bill on the floor. Well, that doesn't tell you how you're going to get past the filibuster in the Senate. I mean, it's still a pretty ineffective means. Now, in terms of whether there are 5 votes on the Supreme Court, I mean, I actually think there's a good chance even this like conservative 6-3 conservative Supreme Court may even rule 7-2. I don't know if they're going to do it on Wednesday or if they're going to delay it or what the procedure is going to be, but I think there are only 2 sure votes to uphold what the radical Trump judge did. That's Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito. I think they're the most radical, especially on abortion on the Supreme Court. Then Neil Gorsuch, I don't know, he's shown some moderation, but he could be a 3rd vote. The next 2 possible votes are Brett Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett. They, I think, have a lot more interest in trying to like send it back to the states and keep it, they overruled Roe v. Wade, and now they want to try to increase the legitimacy of the court by not going along with this radical ruling from Amarillo, Texas in the 5th Circuit. And then, of course, John Roberts is like the squishiest of the 6. He like didn't even want to overrule Roe v. Wade and Dobbs. So that's how I would put the 6 conservatives, from most conservative to most squishy on the abortion issue. But I think there's some chance there might be a 7-2 ruling to not ban most U.S. abortions, like I put in my title. But that was the comment. And Jake Tapper asked that question, but nobody really like went through the justices and talked about like which ones are most likely to vote which way. So I wanted to add that commentary that you didn't get from the corporate news media for some reason. And this next interview, this is I was saying Chuck Todd did not do a great job of cross-examining Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana, who is actually a doctor. And I think he kind of lost all credibility when he couldn't say the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology. For some reason, the word obstetrics was like not within Chuck Todd's ability. I mean, everyone has problems. I particularly have problems pronouncing things correctly when I'm doing a live stream on camera, but obstetrics, especially when you're like, I think he loses credibility on that. And he lets Bill Cassidy get away with saying some things that aren't really true. And anyway, I'll criticize Chuck Todd's cross-examination of Senator Bill Cassidy a little more after we watch that newsmaker clip together over here.
With the dispute over mifepristone, you're somebody who you've not wanted for a while this drug to be available by mail. So I'm curious, why were you not one of the 11 Republican senators to sign on to a brief supporting the Texas ruling?
I mean, I'm not quite sure what you're asking there. I mean, I could sign on briefs all day. I'm not sure that has any great importance. I think what is important is that we have a political process by which we resolve these issues. That particular ruling seems to be going through, it was on a process-oriented thing. Among the reasons that they ruled that way, I'm told, is that the FDA did not follow correctly the Administrative Procedures Act. Now, that's a question of fact. It can be resolved by the courts. It's actively being resolved. I think the broader question is, how do you resolve the issues in general? Yeah. I think that returning it to the states to allow a state's values to guide is very important. In Massachusetts and New York, California, nothing changes. In my state, a law written by a Democratic female state senator and signed into law by a Democratic governor established a more pro-life statute. That's the way I think it's going to resolve politically. I think the way it's going to resolve socially and culturally.
And on the decision on mifepristone, do you believe that the scientific community should sort of take precedent here? The American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology says that mifepristone is safe and effective. You have said their word matters when it comes to over-the-counter birth control. Should their word matter when it comes to the use of mifepristone?
So I think you're going back to the kind of assertion that the principal basis of the court case in Texas was about the safety. And I think specifically it said that it was supposed to, the accelerated pathway was supposed to approve a drug to treat an illness. It is a stretch to call a pregnancy an illness. And of course, obviously, we know what happens to the unborn baby. And so I'm not quite really sure that you're framing this question accurately. Now, beyond that is also a cultural and social issue. In my state, we are a pro-life state. We have legislation which is far more pro-life than it is in, say, California. But the Californians keep their law, and we keep our law, and that's the way it's going to work out nationally.
Right. I guess, though, on this Texas decision, it does seem like it's going to call into question other FDA approvals on other drugs. I mean, do you worry about the upending a status quo and sort of upending the FDA's authority in a way that will be create sort of chaos in the pharmaceutical industry?
I think that's totally alarmist. It's totally alarmist. And by the way, when did the FDA go above the law? It can ignore the Administrative Procedure Act, which every other agency has to follow theoretically, but they don't have to. So I mean, I think that's alarmist, and I also think that the FDA should not be above the law.
I want to get you to respond to something Governor Chris Sununu said about the larger debate about Roe v. Wade and this. Take a listen. I'm curious what your reaction.
Roe v. Wade, whether you agreed with it or not, there was a 50-year precedent there. There's a 20-year precedent with this thing. So now to the American public, it looks like Republicans are coming in and trying to massively change and blow up the system and all of this sort of thing.
You think he has a point?
If he's speaking about the public's perception, I would say that would be the case.
Yeah.
That would be the case. There was a doctor from New Jersey who was testifying before Congress and just, grieving about how all of our patients were fearful. I'm thinking nothing's going to change in New Jersey. She doesn't understand the law, or if she understands it, she's deliberately mischaracterizing. So there is a perception issue out there. But what Dobbs does, it returns to states the decisions to allow the decision to be reflective of the state. In New Jersey, it doesn't change. In Louisiana, it reflects our values. Again, a law written by a Democratic female state senator signed into law by a Democratic governor. So I'm not quite. So I agree with the kind of the premise, but of what Governor Sununu said. But I'm kind of disagreeing with how you're presenting it.
Are you still glad that Roe v. Wade was overturned, or do you think in hindsight this was? You've always said that this is an uncomfortable. It's hard to find a middle ground. Did it turn out Roe v. Wade was the uncomfortable middle ground for America?
I think Dobbs is the uncomfortable middle ground, where people will confront that there's a diversity of opinion, and no one group has the ability to impose their will upon the other. Dobbs, I think, was the correct decision.
Are you going to vote against any attempt at creating a federal standard, considering that you believe this goes back to the states? Whether it's any attempt, whether it's a 20-week. At one time, you had supported a 20-week bill. Would you ever be open to that, or do you think at this point always leave it to the states?
First, I think that the Dobbs decision is a correct decision. You can give me theoreticals all day long. You truly can. I'm pro-life, by the way. I am pro-life. But the fact is you're going to need 60 votes to get something through the Senate. What Tammy Baldwin was just talking about, there could be no restrictions in the states upon abortion, meaning that a child could be coming through the birth canal and could still be aborted. Is that right? No, it's wrong. And most Americans think that is wrong. The fact is Tammy will not get that through the Senate. There's not 60 votes for allowing that. On a bipartisan basis, it's already been rejected. So I kind of reject giving me theoretical after theoretical, because I mean, that's what you do if you want to fill airtime and get people buzzing. But it's not how we actually govern.
I hear you, but there seems to be a real debate here on this front. But I'd also want to talk to you about something that you have decided to touch, which is the third rail of American politics and Social Security.
And you can see the questioning about Social Security down at the link in the video description to the Meet the Press full program if you want to watch that. But Chuck Todd definitely let Bill Cassidy get away with a lot of stuff there. The whole thing about he wouldn't say what number of weeks, saying that that was like a hypothetical, like Lindsey Graham has a bill. And actually, Lindsey Graham is the next clip I'm going to show you. And you saw how Chuck Todd couldn't say the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology. So I don't know why he couldn't say obstetrics, but that didn't bode well for the rest of his questioning. He let Bill Cassidy get away with the whole like baby coming through the birth canal and then we're going to abort it, which isn't really a thing. You'll see that that's something Michelle Lujan Grisham from the governor of New Mexico talks about in the final newsmaker clip I'm going to show you, somewhat better than has been in the clips from this week or last week about why people sometimes have to have abortions in the late term. And it's not like because they want to, like, they on a whim, they've decided they're using abortion as birth control in the final month or two. It's usually for really dire circumstances, and it's only 1% of abortions. Most abortions are done in the first 10 weeks by these pills that apparently Republicans are trying to outlaw. And because Chuck Todd couldn't say the word obstetrics, he let Bill Cassidy get away with not really talking about the safety of mifepristone and how it's, you know, safer than Viagra, safer than Tylenol, safer than a lot of different drugs, and talking about how the FDA didn't follow their own rules. Well, if they didn't follow their own rules in approving mifepristone, that actually goes back over 20 years. That was barred by the statute of limitations. Even the Fifth Circuit, in their partial staying of the order from the one Amarillo, Texas judge, realized that you can't go all the way back to like the year 2000 and overturn what the FDA did back then because you think that it was a pill for a disease and pregnancy's not a disease or whatever he said there. But anyway, Bill Cassidy got away with a lot of misinformation without any real cross-examination by Chuck Todd, and not a good job by Chuck Todd this week. And Jonathan Karl on ABC doesn't really do a great job of cross-examining Lindsey Graham, who apparently says that abortions up to 15 weeks are good on the federal level, but still he agrees with the decision of this radical Trump judge in Amarillo, even if he doesn't think one judge should be able to, one district court judge should be able to put a decision out that affects the entire nation, but he still agrees with it, doesn't get any follow-up from Jonathan Karl, gets to talk about, you know, abortion all the way up till the moment of birth and all that, you know, all the Republican talking points, with very little cross-examination from Jonathan Karl, which I will talk about with you a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
So let's turn to the confusion over the various rulings on the abortion pill. I've heard you for years rail against judicial activism, saying that, you know, judges shouldn't be basically legislating from the bench. So what do you make of this? A single judge in Texas single-handedly upending the legal status of the abortion pill.
Yeah, I don't like a district court judge issuing a national decree, even if I agree with the judge. And what the judge held here is that the Federal Drug Administration didn't follow their own rules. So the Biden administration is trying to send the abortion pill through the mail. There's a statute on the books called the Comstock Act that prohibits sending abortion materials through the mail. That's going to go all the way to the Supreme Court. So I think the radical abortion policies of the Biden administration are wrong. But at the end of the day, we're a rule of law nation, and let's see what the Supreme Court does with this. But the decision by the Biden administration, Jonathan, to allow the pill to be sent through the mail violates an existing statute on the books.
What do you make of Florida? DeSantis has now signed a 6-week ban. Is that going to complicate his efforts to become president of the United States should he become a candidate? To have a 6-week ban that's far more aggressive than what you've proposed?
Right. So under my legislation, states can be more restrictive, but at 15 weeks, we limit abortion on demand. My Democratic colleagues are not what you said. They have supported legislation allowing abortion on demand, taxpayer funded up to the moment of birth. DeSantis will have to answer the question, do you support a national ban at 6 weeks? Why did you pick 6 weeks? The legislative body of Florida supported what he did. This is an issue worth talking about. Should we be a nation that allows abortion on demand up to the moment of birth with taxpayer funded money? Or should we have limits at 15 weeks like Europe? Should we be like North Korea and China? Or should we be more like Europe nationally? Should states have the right to regulate abortion up to a point? These are issues that matter. Should young girls be able to play sports with biological males? The policy of the Biden administration is to allow young children, minor children, to transition, to have their life turned upside down, to allow medical procedures to change gender before you get 18 years of age. All of these issues will be on the ballot, and they should be.
And Senator, you were just in Saudi Arabia. You met with Crown Prince Mohammed.
And then Jonathan Karl actually does a better job of cross-examining Lindsey Graham about Saudi Arabia and how he said that he would never have any dealings with the Crown Prince in Saudi Arabia, but that he just went and met with him. That was after the killing of that Washington Post journalist Khashoggi that I covered like years ago when that happened during the Trump administration. But anyway, I pretty much pre-criticized that cross-examination by Jonathan Karl, except for the fact that he let Lindsey Graham get away with mentioning the Comstock Act, which a lot of legal scholars think is unconstitutional. I mean, it was like a morals law that stopped sending anything through the mail that was like immoral, including, talking about sex or reproduction or anything having to do with abortion or, and that had nothing to do with like federally approved drugs. And maybe it will go all the way to the Supreme Court, but I doubt the Comstock Act is going to be held constitutional in stopping a federally approved drug from being sent through the mail. So that was one other criticism I had of that cross-examination. And then the worst cross-examination on the abortion issue. This is Shannon Bream on Fox News Sunday talking to Republican Representative Nancy Mace from South Carolina, a member of Congress from the same state as Lindsey Graham. And you'll see she even uses Lindsey Graham to cross-examine Nancy Mace about like criticizing her, first of all, for not being pro-life enough, even though she claims to be pro-life. She's, between like 15 and 20 weeks or whatever. And then it's all about like, how can Republicans win even while being anti-abortion, showing these really spun poll numbers. Remember that NBC News Meet the Press poll I showed you from the NBC News Meet the Press news summary? Like 61% of voters disapprove of the overturning of Roe v. Wade, which basically gave women a fairly absolute right of abortion in the first trimester, and then a fairly strong right to get an abortion in the second trimester before viability, and only gave the states real power to regulate in the third trimester after viability. And that isn't what Fox News Sunday shows in their polls. And this is really, like I said, like, please, Representative Nancy Mace, who won in a purple district in South Carolina, tell us how Republicans can win and still oppose abortions when, like, what is it, 69% or over 60% of all voters think Roe v. Wade should not have been overturned. And I'll talk about that a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
Yeah, and I think that it's clear that you think one of the issues the party is not doing well on is this issue of abortion as well. You say that you're pro-life. I want to read how the Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life America list has you. They say, yes, you voted largely pro-life, but confusingly, she's also publicly denounced certain protections for unborn children and undermined thoughtful strategy of pro-life members of Congress who are working to push back against the extremism of pro-abortion members of Congress. So how do you define pro-life? Where do you set the limits? Where would you set restrictions and exceptions? What's your position?
I find it ironic that Susan B. Anthony would attack me. I'm a victim of rape. I advocate for women who've been raped, and that organization will no longer talk to my office about pro-life legislation because I'm talking about birth control. I mean, some of these groups have gotten so over the top and extreme. We need to find a middle ground on this issue, and I have a great pro-life voting record, but some of the stances we've taken, especially when it comes to rape and incest, protecting the life of the mother, it's so extreme. The middle, the independent voters, right of center, left of center, they cannot support us. And again, I represent a purple district. I talked to a voter the other day, and she left the Republican Party over this issue. She's an independent voter. She's pro-choice. Her gestational limits, for example, are at 14 weeks. I'm a pro-life legislator. I'm at 15 to 20 weeks. And so there's a lot of middle ground. I think it's important in how we talk about these issues and offer solutions. We've got 14 counties in South Carolina that don't have a single OBGYN doctor. So if we're going to ban abortion, what are we doing to make sure women have access to birth control? What are we doing about how do we improve adoption services in our country? What about the kids that are not wanted? What about our foster care system? What about getting nurses that can treat women who need, OBGYN care in those rural areas? What are we doing about getting birth control over the counter at pharmacies? There are a lot of things that we can do to protect life and not alienate the independent voter. And that's what Susan B. Anthony's list misses.
Okay, and to my understanding, they have no problem with birth control. For them, it's the issue of abortion. I want to put a couple of Gallup polls here to look at where Americans are on this issue, because we hear that a majority of this country is pro-choice, tipping that way in the last few years. But here are some recent polling about whether it should be legal only under certain circumstances. That's 50% of Americans, another 13% illegal in all circumstances. So there are people who clearly have issues. When you look at the trimester framework, by the time you hit the second trimester, a majority of Americans in this poll, here Gallup, 55% of them say that they think abortion should be illegal. So that's hitting that 13-week point. Here's what Senator Graham said about how this is being handled last week on Fox News Sunday.
If you're pro-life, you need to explain what that means. Here's what it means to me. I want to protect as many babies as possible. I want exceptions for pregnancies as a result of rape, incest. If the life of the mother's in jeopardy, then the family can decide. I do believe in common sense restrictions on abortion. That's where America's at. The Democratic solution when it comes to abortion is taxpayer-funded abortion up to the moment of birth. That's barbaric. That's like China. That's like North Korea.
So he's among others who say that Republicans are failing because they aren't clearly articulating their positions, and they're not clearly articulating the Democrats' positions either. Is that fair?
I would agree with that. I think that's fair. But what I saw last year in the midterm elections, I saw us lose seats we should have won. I actually made this issue a cornerstone of my campaign. I actually had an ad about rape, talking about exceptions, because I wanted voters to know where I stood on the issue. I've written op-eds. I've done a number of interviews. I've made very clear what my position is. And rather than winning by 1 point, which is what I won by 2 years ago when I first came to Congress, I ended up winning by 14 points because I clearly articulated where I was on the issue. And even though I'm pro-life, I represent a pro-choice district, and I saw the tide change after Roe was overturned. We went mildly pro-choice to being vast majority of voters being pro-choice after Roe v. Wade. It changed the entire electoral environment in 22, and I will tell you, based on Senator Graham's comments and some of the positions I've taken, we have not learned our lesson from the midterm election.
But you're saying you can embrace the abortion issue and talk about it and still win. You talked about increasing your margin there. Is it just that you think GOP lawmakers and candidates are not articulating this carefully, or should they stay away from the issue altogether?
They should not stay away from it. They should be vocal and articulate where exactly they stand to try to find that middle ground. Because when you're talking about rape and incest, the vast majority of people absolutely agree. When you're talking about a 15-week ban, most people agree with that as well. And so birth control. These are all things that women support women are watching, but instead it seems like and feels like we're burying our heads in the sand. And every time I stick my head out and I take a position, I take it very publicly, Republicans will call me privately, and then I say, well, what bill can we do? Do you want to do with me? What press conference? And then there's silence. It's crickets, and it's tone deaf. And we're afraid of the issue because we're afraid of our base, but that's not where the base is. I mean, I won my primary last year. I would argue, the only person that beat President Trump in a primary. I won it by 9 points, and this has been my position all along. I have not changed who I am. I've stood my ground on my principles and my beliefs, and we won resoundingly.
And we'll see how many Republicans take that tack. Congressman Mace, thank you for being with us. Good to see you.
So, yeah, that was not a great cross-examination. There were a lot of bad things there. You know, one thing Representative Nancy Mace talked about there was how the Dobbs decision overturning Roe v. Wade made a lot of women even more pro-choice. And if you go back and look at the fine print on those polls that Shannon Bream was showing her about how, like, if you look at the trimester format, that most Americans think that after the first trimester, abortion should be illegal. And they took Gallup polling from May 2021 and May 2022, which I don't even know why they would do that on like had to combine 2 different years to get that number, because like the previous number was just May 2022. And guess what? The Dobbs decision that overturned Roe v. Wade, that was in June 2022. Why are they taking polling information? And Shannon Bream even called it recent polling information. But that polling information is like a year old or 2 years old if you go and look at the fine print. That was like totally bogus. And most Americans actually think Roe v. Wade shouldn't have been overturned, as you saw on NBC News' Meet the Press in this screenshot I kept. But then the final clip I want to show you, this is CBS News' Face the Nation. It's a Democrat, the governor of New Mexico, Michelle Lujan Grisham, talking about where the Democrats' limits are and when abortion should no longer be available. And she talks about viability. She talks about the 1% of abortions that are late term. She doesn't really talk about medical necessity, and I don't think it's all that clear. But it's the best we've got in the clips from this week and last week, where it's really like those late-term abortions are either because the baby's not going to survive, or the woman is going to die, or there's a severe threat to her health, and that's those are all the reasons that doctors and women decide to perform late-term abortions. And at least Michelle Lujan Grisham, the governor of New Mexico, talks about the rarity, but not really the medical necessity. And I'll talk about all of that a little more after we watch that final newsmaker clip together over here.
So your state is part of a 20-state coalition of governors, the Reproductive Freedom Alliance. Some of the states in it have started stockpiling this medication for abortion. When you were here in February, you said that's the wrong focus, the wrong question.
Well,
has that changed?
No, for me, it hasn't changed. And we're going to make sure, and we already are, that we have access to all of those medications. But if the response is we'll stockpile instead of protecting all access, then we're minimizing the work that we have to do to make sure that women and families are fully protected. Not that in and of itself, there's a disagreement by state that's making sure that irrespective of the legal decisions, we're going to make sure that medication abortion is available in our state. But I think that we are moving, and to Jan's point, it's every social issue that you disagree with. Is it stem cell research? Is it fertility drugs? Whatever it is in this context, if we're going to use the federal courts as a way to bar and ban access, we are looking at a national abortion ban and more. And I think states have to band together to do as much as they can in opposition to that.
And the states are on the front lines here because there is no federal guarantee. The court kicked it back to chief executives like yourself back in June. So currently in New Mexico, abortion is legal, but you don't actually have a law codifying it. I know you want to write one.
We do now. So the last time I was here, we didn't, and you were, and thank you, talking about Colorado's work. We now have a law both codifying right to abortion, abortion care and access, as well as gender-affirming care in the state. So that just got signed by me.
So nail down for me then, how do you define, because up till now, my understanding is there wasn't a limit on when in pregnancy a woman could receive an abortion. Have you set any limit on
There are no limits. So for us,
that's
and
very
for me,
controversial.
it can be. I mean, look, it's the 1% of all abortions, and that's still a sizable number of abortions worldwide.
1% over 21 weeks of pregnancy.
Correct. However, you know, look, these are women that have named these soon-to-be-born babies. These are horrific medical conditions. And again, New Mexico's position and mine is that we should not be interfering with a woman's medical situation and her decision about that life-threatening potential circumstance. We shouldn't be doing that.
Explain that. How do you define fetal viability or that line?
So
you say it's very, very uncommon, but
it is. That is not defined. It is left to two physicians make that decision with the patient. That's the issue, is that the government's two physicians. Mm-hmm.
And so the fear is that folks could take that to an extreme if someone has an affliction that isn't life-threatening.
Well, of course. And
that they're picking and choosing which children they want to carry to term or not.
I find that argument not to be nearly as compelling as the arguments that we make, that we should be focused on contraceptives and better maternal health care, which means you have better outcomes. It's the wrong side of the argument, and it pushes buttons for people's fears about what's really happening. Late-term abortions should occur as rarely as humanly possible, and they should be only for life-threatening conditions of the fetus or the mother, and that should be analyzed by that physician. If we start making any access points, which we are all around the country, you end up with triggers and 6 weeks, fewer than 6 weeks. These are all barriers to women's health care. Comprehensive reproductive health care. And New Mexico is going to stand with many other states to make sure that's not the direction we're headed in.
So yeah, I thought that was a fairly good explanation from the New Mexico governor. The main criticism I had, like I said before I showed the clip, they didn't talk about medical necessity, didn't talk about the threat to the health of the mother, more about the threat to the life, and Margaret Brennan's cross-examination there, where she switched from like the reason for late-term abortion to the idea of fetal viability, which also isn't the same thing. And anyway, that's it for the newsmaker clips. I did briefly want to address that Second Amendment issue I saw in the live comments along the way. First, if you want me to recite the 27 words of the Second Amendment from memory, it's a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Right? That's, you can go, if you have your copy of the ACLU Constitution, which for $5 at a link under the video description, either a $5 monthly contribution through Patreon or a one-time $5 contribution through PayPal. If you give me a shipping address, I will send you this ACLU Constitution and you can read the Second Amendment. And then I saw some discussion about what the word regulated means in the Second Amendment, if it means something different from what it means now, like regulated, does it mean regulation? Well, if you have your ACLU Constitution, you can also look at Article 1, Section 8, Clause 2 of the Constitution. Let's see, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 2. Oh, no, sorry, Clause 3. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3 gives Congress the power to regulate commerce with foreign nations and among the several states and with the Indian tribes. So actually, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3 uses the word regulate to mean the same thing that we know that regulate means today. So why does the word regulate mean something different in the Second Amendment than it does in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3? Riddle me that. And anyway, that is the end of my program for the day. I will be back next Monday. I might have something next Sunday because I'm doing this live stream for the ACLU next Sunday. Now, I might end up with some video out of it. But I will be back next Monday. It might be a little bit of a the ACLU of Northern California is having its conference and lobby day in Sacramento next Sunday and Monday, and I'm involved in that, so I might have to delay the show a little bit next Monday. We'll see how it goes, what time I have to put into that, but I will be back next Monday and every Monday for, well, at least through the 2024 presidential cycle, which goes through January 2025. I was just talking about that earlier this week, that the presidential cycle goes at least through January 26, 2025, because that apparently is an important day in our presidential election cycle now. And so I will be doing this Monday live stream through January 2025, and then I will reassess. That may be the end of it, but we'll see. That's a long time from now. And anyway, until then, until next Monday, until I have some other reason to upload a video, I guess I will be seeing all of you. Oh, and thank you to Lulu Girl and Tom Trask for the super chat contributions. I did see those along the way. I really appreciate that. And anyway, until, what is going on here? What did I just do? I lost my ability to stop the live stream. What is going on here? Oh, until then, I will be seeing all of you around the internet.